Yep, and we're able to do that, you know. I would imagine. Yeah, I can check. I am. I'm slowly feeling like I Yep. Yep. Um, it's small things like even tracking legislation because it's a complete different system than what I was used to, and the process is different. That's yeah. Yes. Yeah, that was another piece where I'm just like, why is their language crossed out? And then I was just like, oh, yeah, right. Right. That is the worst job on the both of those. Really? I just think it's so there is no close of business for a scheduler because you're constantly monitoring or yeah, yeah, yeah. Especially particular city dates, it's because of the number. Yep. I I cannot imagine. Oh, well, that's good. Some schedulers literally have lives, which is not good. Gosh. Wow. Hey. Oh, you got a good gig. You got a good gig. Oh, dang. Wow. Man, good. experience. Good. Good.
It's kind of like some of the things where it's actually-
Good morning, members of the committee. Thank y'all for being here on committee day. We've got a busy agenda and we're going to try to get started here. And we're on a hard 1 hour time frame. We've got another committee coming in behind us. So we're going to try to go through, we got several bills and I know some people want to testify on some of them. So I'm going to try to limit testimony. Anybody that does testify, please keep it short and to the point, to the bill. I'm going to ask Representative LaRicchia to open us with a prayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, we love you. Thank you for this day, God. Thank you for how you bless us every day. Guide and direct us in all that we do, that it would be good for Georgia and bring glory to you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you. Well, we've, as I said, we got a busy day. I see Chair Lady, Chairman Bonnie Rich here. Got a bill. I think, welcome to the Ag Committee. Have you ever been to the Ag Committee with a bill before? Well, we're glad to have you here. I know you've got another little lesser committee that you want to try to get to over in the basement, but so the mic is yours. HB 1450.
Yes. May I pass these out? Or
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the opportunity to talk about this bill. I'm especially grateful because I have heard and read about a lot of misconceptions of the bill. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here. This bill is, let's see, the LC number is LC 44-1999. And this bill is brought by a coalition of Georgia groups. This is meant to prevent us all being saturated with multiple groups, but there are 18 different groups, including the Athens Area Humane Society, the DeKalb County Animal Advisory Board, Paws Forever Home, which is out of Tifton, Paws Humane out of Columbus. And like I said, there are a total of 18, and I have those there if anybody is interested. This bill is patterned after a Texas law that was just enacted and signed by the governor. It provides for some needed upgrades to the humane standards of care for dogs who live outdoors, whether they're tethered, fenced, or kenneled. So basically, it pertains to dogs that are kept outdoors and are contained by a human. We have some horrific examples of dogs that are contained or chained without the opportunity to really save themselves by finding water or food or cover. They're forced to stand or lie in their own excrement with open, oozing, and undoubtedly painful wounds from embedded collars and other injuries. In Georgia, we currently have loose standards that are just too vague for local animal control and law enforcement to be able to take action before irrevocable harm is done to these animals that we have domesticated and that we are containing. This bill will make it unlawful to contain a dog without access to adequate potable water, food, and shelter to protect it from inclement weather. It requires an area that the dog is kept in, whether it's a tether or a pen, that allows the dog to move enough to avoid lying in his own excrement or standing in water, and that provides shade, whether artificial or natural, from the direct sun. This is not an anti-tether bill. I've gotten a lot of emails about that. It provides specifics for tethering. It allows for all types of unattended tethering, except for that uses chains and weights, which, if any of you know about dogfighting, that's the way dog fighters keep their dogs. And it's meant to keep them in pain and to make them aggressive. This bill contains exceptions for farmers, hunters, breeders, and anybody who's actively engaging with working dogs. It also contains some common sense exceptions for normal folk like us who are camping in public areas. It also allows us to, of course, walk a dog on a leash and even leave a dog in the back of a truck if it's for a short period of time while the owner is taking care of a temporary task. It also, of course, allows exceptions for farming and herding and breeding. Details about a lot of these basic standards of care are already provided for dogs involved in commercial activities in Georgia with the Georgia Department of Agriculture's rules and regulations. But there's not anything comparable for privately owned dogs. Failure to provide the most basic care leads to injury and illness. And that's the overwhelming reason for the majority of complaint calls to animal control and law enforcement in Georgia with respect to dogs. This bill reduces ambiguity for pet owners, animal control officers, law enforcement officers, and the courts. It provides clear delineated guidelines. Most importantly for me, and probably most of you, is that it also provides a warning system that allows animal enforcement to intervene before irrevocable harm is done to the animal, which saves taxpayer and charitable dollars otherwise spent on rehabilitation and veterinary care. In summary, this bill affects only the most egregious dog owners, and it's very much needed in Georgia. I passed out a flyer that shows you an example of the standard of care that we are allowing to happen here in Georgia. And with that, I will yield for any questions.
Thank you. We do have some questions. I wanted to remind, I don't think I said before this started, this is the first time we've heard this bill, and it's going to be a hearing only today. So please feel free to ask any questions. So we've got Chairman Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chair. We talked briefly about this, and I guess wanted to circle back on the adequate shelter piece.
Yes.
I have dogs, but they don't have a dog house. They kind of sleep where they want to sleep, whether it be the barn or the porch or under a truck or wherever. So if somebody rides by my house and looks for a dog house, they're not going to find one.
Right. And we have some substitute language because in talking with you, that makes perfect sense. Sounds a lot like the way my dogs were when I was growing up, when I lived in a more rural area. So there are definitely situations where that is adequate housing. So we have some proposed substitute language. Do you have it here with you?
I don't have it in front of me, but we could send it, but it covers the barn, the carport, as long as it's safe and the dog
Okay.
can get away from the
Right,
sun, not
right.
be trapped in standing water or lose all their body heat
Okay.
to the ground. So we do want to compromise.
All right. And I got one more follow up, Mr. Chairman. The potable water. So is that, there's a 5-gallon bucket sitting by the door the dog drinks out of, or does that mean if it's good for me, it's good for the dog?
Yeah, that is right. So obviously, if your dog is drinking out of that 5-gallon bucket of water, it's potable. He's not dying or sick. So that is sufficient under the proposed bill.
Can I answer that?
Yes.
I'm Deborah with Humane Society of the United States, and I'm part of this coalition.
Mhm.
And part of my job in Georgia is fielding so many cruelty calls from all over the state, particularly in relationship to ambiguous law that does not define what shelter is and does not lay out responsible care in a way that law enforcement, and in particular where there's no animal control, can actually where they can actually take action on these things. And one of the biggest complaints, of course, in the winter is so much frozen water. People who leave their pets outside and don't check on the water, change the water, or have any way to keep the water from freezing. That's a huge issue. Even in Georgia, that is an issue. And also in the summer, sometimes water getting full of muck and different kinds of slime and such in the water never being changed. So what you're describing, it sounds like you're taking care and your dog has potable water. And this is not directed to anybody who is looking after their pets properly.
Thank you. I also wanted to recognize 2 of our members online, Representative Coggins and Representative Mitchell, are also online. Next question is Representative Donahue.
Thank you, Chairman. And that was pretty much the question that I was going to ask. I have a perimeter dog and he has the opportunity to sleep on the pole barn or wherever he wants to. And he covers most of my property. But with that, I just read this, in training dogs, a choke collar is something that's needed. And that's not in here. I read choke collar, but I want to make sure that's not a problem.
It is written in the exceptions and
Right.
it might be in the substitute bill. We've listened to these concerns that y'all have had. Representative Rich has been speaking to y'all.
Right.
And there is definitely exemptions for dogs that are actively involved in training, hunting, trials, quite a variety of people who are caring for their animals,
Right.
but temporarily need to restrain them in some way. This will not affect them.
Okay.
At
And
all.
I appreciate it because there are times that you'll see
Right.
animals are very much mistreated, but then government doesn't need to come and tell everything we have to do. So I don't have a problem with this part. I just want to make sure we can't legislate.
No,
So-
thank you for, and y'all, the whole point of this is these are complaints that everybody in, there are over 600 rescues and shelters in Georgia. We hear about these issues all the time. It isn't that law enforcement isn't concerned. It's that if there's not a trained law enforcement on animal issues, the bill right now, our laws right now are not clear enough. This is for clarity. This is common sense upgrades to our law. It's going to make it easier to enforce the sheltering and tethering common sense actions. But here's the main part, and Representative Rich mentioned it, and I'd like to just reiterate it. Georgia does have felony cruelty law. If someone intentionally starves their animal, it is a crime. We already have that. But our law doesn't kick in until there's irrevocable damage, till the animal is so sick or has suffered for so long. This is an early warning system that will give animal control or law enforcement an opportunity to intervene. And I also want to point out that in the law, this is very important, there is a right to correct. In other words, if someone came to your property and said, this is not a responsible way to keep your pet, they wouldn't take your pet away that day. You would have an opportunity to correct. This is truly, we are trying to find a way to protect animals in Georgia without causing any extra difficulties for people who responsibly take care of their pets, rural and urban.
Okay, thank you. We got a few more questions, Chairman Rich. Representative Cameron.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. Thank you for bringing this bill. I live up in the northwest corner of the state, and sometimes our animal people have trouble. And it's not because the law enforcement people don't want to enforce the law. It's because they're so busy doing other things. They don't really, looking at animal cruelty cases, it kind of falls down. So what kind of enforcement or tools do we have for law enforcement or to assist them?
Well, the specific delineation of some definitions and guidelines will help them. This bill also provides for a ticketing process. So it doesn't require law enforcement to go in and actually impound the dog. There's a ticketing process and then a period of time where there's a right to cure and to bring the standards up. So it actually will save law enforcement time.
All right, thank you.
Chairman.
Thank you. And I'd like to speak to that too real quickly. I know we're short on time. So let me just say that in Georgia, between several local organizations as well as several nationals, including us, there is so much free training available for law enforcement to help them understand why this is important, how it is connected to human crime and human issues, and how to actually address these issues. And if anybody wants more information about that, we're happy to share it. But law enforcement can be trained and receive post hours for this training in animal, how to identify, investigate, and prosecute animal cruelty.
All right, thank you.
Chairman Perkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your testimony, you had mentioned that this legislation has to do with a contained environment. Under 4842, line 44, it doesn't appear that this is a contained, and maybe I'm reading it wrong. You and I had a quick conversation this morning where you intimated that I might have misread the bill, and that is absolutely correct, that I probably could have. It seemed like you were loaded for bear this morning. That Gwinnett traffic is awful. But it doesn't appear that this is part. In just my reading, it shall be unlawful for any person to leave a dog outside and unattended without access to these things. And so my concern is that's not a containment system. That is So I got a dog like, maybe Sam, Chairman Watson. I don't know how I do this, but, and so maybe have a dog like that. So this is not a containment system. And let's say the people ride by and they look and they say, well, adequate water, according to the definition, means potable water which is accessible to a dog at all times. And of a sufficient amount to prevent blah, 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 significant risk. Maybe that dog just has lapped up every bit of the water. I've got him outside. And, when I get it in lunch, I'll, put some more water out there, but there ain't none in his bowl right now. Technically, as I'm reading it, and I could, again, have misread it. I have come into violation of this legislation.
Well,
Maybe I'm reading it wrong.
we can take a look at that, but your dog has access to fresh water. Yes, your dog is not dehydrated, sick. Your dog has access to fresh water.
Well, at the time that the guy comes by, the law enforcement or whomever, maybe he does not have access. Maybe he just lapped it all up. It's,
Okay.
We put water in there in the morning, we come in at lunch, but when they come by, oh my goodness,
And
there's
again,
no water
nobody's
here.
coming to take your dog away.
Well,
If it
I'm just
appeared that
looking at
way,
the-
there might be a question, but you would answer it like you're answering it to us of how your dog gets water.
Yeah, and I think it also goes to the issue that your dog is obviously not dehydrated. This is not meant, and if there's some language that we could put in here to tighten this up, but if your dog has just drunk all of the water that you had left out for him that morning, but that's something that we can address. If the dog is not dehydrated, then we're not worried about that dog. If that dog is not sick.
Okay. So my preference is not to tighten up. I actually want to
Broaden. Do you want to, okay.
to broaden, to allow, if, I've got a rescue dog, I've got,
Thank
he's just a dog. And he's, or she, I don't know what the dog is. It's
Okay.
just a dog. So I don't want to, all of a sudden have, you got $150 or $200 or whatever. I'm just trying to keep a dog from getting killed. He's at the house. It ain't doing much good for me, but, if we have legislation here, and is that not true? If we have legislation here that provides where I am in violation, because adequate shelter, adequate water, adequate food, at one time when you come by, it doesn't show, according to the definition that we have here, adequate water, adequate shelter, or adequate food. Maybe I just have him chained up under a pecan tree because we got a dove shoot and the dog gets scared. He's going to run away unless I have him tied up and he's unattended. He don't have, but.
And that's in there,
You get a bunch of
temporary-
folks shooting dogs out behind the house and the dog's going to get scared and run away. So I've got him tied up and I'm stopping right there.
That's
I
okay,
see
but
too
can I
many
just ask
people
you a quick
laughing
question?
at
Why
me,
is
but yes.
anybody, okay, if your dog
All
is
right.
healthy and getting what it needs,
Yeah.
why is anybody
apologize.
coming?
Yep.
How about this? How about we
Well-
discuss your concerns following the
Yeah.
hearing and see if we can.
Let's get to some questions and then.
I would like to, I think he's given some testimony, and I would like to address that. This bill is not directed at people like you. And every single situation that you described is covered by the bill and you are not at risk. Now, the definition of adequate water, I think I hear you here, lines 24 through 26. Adequate water means potable water, which is accessible to a dog. So the words at all times. I think if we took out the words at all times and just said, which is of a sufficient amount to prevent a dog's dehydration or significant risk to his health. I think that addresses your concern. You're concerned about tying the dog up while you're having a shoot. That's in the bill. Temporary restraints are fine. So you are not at risk under this bill.
Okay, let's get a few more questions. Point made. Representative LaRocca, I think you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Chair. I totally see where you're going with this bill. I really do. But this is one of those challenges that some of us, what we call the old South Georgia country boys, have. If you'll notice kind of who has spoken right here, that's what you'll hear. We compete with what maybe some of our Metro colleagues, Metro members, and even our citizens of the state perceive as being animal cruelty or neglect. And the Department of Agriculture does a tremendous job in responding to either local law enforcement, local governments, or citizens that have complaints of animal cruelty, whether that's equine, whether that's cows, or whether that be dogs and cats. I'm going to try to cut to the chase. We do not need this legislation, particularly in my region, in my district. If somebody rides by your house and your cow, your horse, or your dog's not being cared for, he'll be gone when you get home. They'll take him and feed him. They'll make sure they'll just bring water and put in there for him. I have reported cases of animal cruelty through our company. We're a termite and pest control company. We go to hundreds of houses, and we've seen situations where we would do pest control for a landlord. They'd have dogs that were dehydrated, tethered improperly, whatever. But I think we already have an adequate amount of laws. As you mentioned, aggravated neglect is a felony on animals. And so I know this time's short. I want this committee to hear me clearly. This legislation is not needed.
Thank you for your testimony, Representative LaRocca, but it is needed. And we have a lot of evidence to indicate that it is, and I will actually bring as many of those examples to you as I can. Every single day in Georgia, we have animals who are chained and tethered, who are starving, their ribs are showing. We have dogs with embedded collars. It's very common for people to get a young dog, to put a collar on it, to tether it. It becomes embedded, infected, and we have law enforcement that cannot do anything until the dog is beyond help.
But
It is needed.
This picture of this dog that you put up here that makes everybody teary-eyed is illegal today and can be enforced today, either by local law enforcement or the animal control department in those counties.
So what this law will do, Representative LaRocca, is it will allow law enforcement and animal control to go to that homeowner or that pet owner and say, you need to do X, Y, and Z differently. You have time to cure. It's a good law. It protects pet owners and it is humane. It's part of a civilized society. We are not trying to citify our country, our country folk here. We're not trying to say that you have to let your dog live inside or that you have to have your dog living in the same conditions that they live in my house. These are basic levels of humane treatment for domesticated animals that we have domesticated, and the law is very much needed.
Thank you, Chairman Rich. We're going to take maybe one or possibly two more questions and move on. It's getting late. We got some other bills. Representative Lewis Ward. You're on. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Chair, you mentioned that this piece of legislation is patterned after a bill in Texas.
Yes.
I just was wondering how many other states have a similar law?
Tennessee is considering it patterned after Texas as well. North Carolina has a similar law. What other states that are near us? Those are the ones. There are states all over the country, but I was focusing on the ones that are closest to us.
And I could get a list. I could get a list for you.
Representative Camp, third signer on the bill.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Chairman Rich, for this bill. Much like Representative LaRocca, I have the opportunity to go in a lot of homes as a real estate agent. And one thing, especially during the recession, that was very evident were people were leaving their homes and they didn't have any place to bring their dogs. And so they would leave in the backyard a bowl of water and a bag of dog food. And it was very tragic because by the time I got there, by the time the bank called me, oftentimes the dog had been out of food for a long time. And it was a really hard situation. I'm wondering, just hearing this testimony and thinking about, unfortunately, the things I have seen, with animals. Sometimes they would be fine. Sometimes the dogs would be fine and sometimes they wouldn't. Perhaps in line 44, amending to say it shall be unlawful for any person to leave a dog outside, comma, unattended without access to, comma, and in distress. I think distress could be an interesting aspect of this because, you know, if you go to someone's home and their dogs knock the water over, or their food bowl is empty, but they're obviously fine, that's a different situation than going to a house and having a lethargic animal that's starving and obviously dehydrated. Just a consideration for the bill.
Yes, thank you, Representative. And that is, we are open to all of those kinds of suggestions. And I think that is a very good suggestion in order to not have any unintended consequences for this bill, because we are trying to protect only those domesticated dogs that are in distress before it becomes too late. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know you've got another committee to get to, Chairman Rich. You know, I thought judiciary was tough, but it seems like agriculture committee is right up to the same standards on this. So thank you for coming here. We're gonna have to take one of bit of testimony from one other person that signed up, William Woodall. If you would come, thank you for being
Thank
here.
you all for
I'm-
considering this.
And I think you got the flavor of maybe a little more work on this bill, could possibly get back before crossover and do that. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is William Woodall. I represent the Georgia Hunting and Fishing Federation. I don't want to take up a whole lot of your time, but we do have concerns with the bill. I think there are some unintended consequences. I'll give one quick example. In our South Georgia area and across the state, we have hunting preserves and plantations. When I go out quail hunting with my children, you know, there are rain barrels set up for those dogs to go get water and drink water. And if you look at the definition in this bill for adequate water being potable water, that definition under EPA guidelines is for consumption, human consumption. And there's other unintended consequences with the bill, but I won't go into it. I know you guys got a lot of stuff to go into, but I'd be willing to work with the author and see if we can come up with some fixes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. That's all. Well, I know some other members of the committee's got some questions. I hope you'll approach the author. I know there are some exemptions in this bill and she's open to looking at some other language or other concerns, and we'll revisit this at our next meeting, hopefully. So I'd like to move on to our next bill if we could. Representative Maynard, 1152. Representative, you're among friends here, over in the ag corner of the house floor. You're several of us are right close by.
And thank you for signing on to the bill.
Absolutely. I like the bill. I like the bill. It might have helped it. So some folks might have some concerns with this bill too, but we're ready to hear it. Mike's yours.
Okay, thank you for letting me present it in subcommittee, and I'm here again before the larger committee. We had a lively discussion in subcommittee just about the common sense piece of the bill. And basically what the bill does, I'll tell you a story of how this bill even came to be. In my community, which is an urban community, there's a Family Dollar. And in urban communities, a lot of times you don't have a grocery store. So it's a corner store is your grocery store. And a man in front of me was buying a gallon of milk. It was $2 and something. And when he was about to leave, he said, "What about my change?" And the store clerk told him, "It's exact change only." And he said, "Well, what about the change? And give me my dollars back." He was like, "No, it's exact change only." So the man needed the milk. For whatever reasons, he needed the milk and he left out without getting any change. And so his gallon of milk cost $5. And some other things that have happened in this discussion, when you go to a restaurant, a drive-through, it's any number of different places, there'll be signs that say exact change only. The problem with that is we have businesses, and this is nothing against businesses, but the businesses are keeping our money, and that's not really fair to be keeping our money. And so the bill with the revision and the substitute based on discussion in subcommittee, it says that at least give the consumer a store credit. Yeah, you've got to give the consumer their money back. The other piece to that is a lot of people, because of COVID, a lot of businesses went into a cashless system, but everyone doesn't use a card. And so we can't really force people as consumers in America to no longer use our dollar bill that, this society was based on. And who doesn't have a debit card, right? So you have senior citizens that don't necessarily use debit cards. I spoke to Chairman Watson yesterday. People in rural communities don't necessarily use credit cards. And in the urban community, people might not even have a checking account, right? They get paid and they go to a check cashing facility, they get their money, but there's no card that they have. And so this bill is really just trying to help consumers in two ways. One, give us our change back. And two, don't force us to use a card and not be able to do business with you because we don't have a card. And I yield.
Okay, I don't think we spoke to the bill number. It is a substitute LC 345819S. And that other language was added since you were here last time. We do have a question. Representative Camp.
Representative Maynard, thank you so much for bringing this bill. I think this bill is important to a lot of segments of our population who do not have, for a number of reasons, and it's a choice to have online banking or to have a debit card or a credit card. That's a choice that people make. And not everyone is going to qualify for that, in addition to the choice aspect of it. So I appreciate this because I don't want someone who's a hardworking individual to be in a situation where they're paying $5 for a gallon of milk. And I mentioned this in subcommittee, but I've got a piece of tender here. And it says here, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. The coin shortage that happened last year I discussed with my bank recently, there's not a coin shortage according to my local bank. So I don't know the reason and the purpose for this happening, but my heart goes out to the person that you witnessed in Family Dollar having to do that. I think this is a good bill, and I think this is an important bill. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Camp.
Representative Kirby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too am in support of your bill, and this along the same lines. You just mentioned the words legal tender, and I was thinking maybe we go ahead and put that definition in there because all of our money says it's legal tender, and I just looked up. It clearly says coins or banknotes that must be accepted if offered payment of a debt. And if we put that, if we could stick that in there, like after line 14, so define legal tender. So we see it on the dollar bills or $20 bills. I get one, she gets 20s. I don't know. But I think it would help people understand you don't have a choice. This is our United States currency and it's accepted.
I think that's a good suggestion. Could Legal Legis Council add that?
Representative, Leg Council Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking it up right now. My guess is that legal tender is already defined somewhere else in the code, and I'm just trying to check on that right now. But if it is not, that's a definition that we can put in. But my inclination is that it's probably already defined somewhere in the commercial code.
Okay. Next question, Representative Yarder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Maynard, for bringing this bill. As a merchant, I just couldn't imagine not giving my customers change. And I just appreciate you bringing that. I would feel like I was stealing from them basically. And if we run out of change, suppose we run out of nickels, I instruct my folks to give them a dime, to make it right, so I appreciate again you bringing this, and it's very important to folks in my area, rural area that don't necessarily have debit cards or credit cards that use cash. So thank you.
I appreciate that comment. All merchants are not as forthright as you, so thank God for you.
Chairman Perkle.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. Interesting bill. Here's one area that I'm concerned about regarding unintended consequences. The other night, a friend of mine, he actually happened to be sitting beside me, went out to eat, and we went to one of these restaurants, and you got to pay to park everywhere up here in Atlanta, and it cost me $20 to park my pickup truck, and I couldn't use cash. I had to use I had to go online and do this thing because everything else is broke. You got to go online and do something, and
Parking gap.
it's it's awful. I actually had to cash, but you had to do this, and it's $20 to park for 2 hours. But as I'm reading this bill, and maybe as with the previous bill, maybe I read it, I misread it. Unless otherwise permitted by law, a merchant shall not discriminate against a cash buyer requiring the use of credit in order to purchase. Would this mean that the owner of the lot that I parked my truck in would have to accept cash because of the service they're providing, the parking service? Would that be what that would mean?
That's a interesting thought, because I hadn't thought about
So
parking apps.
my dad is 75, and he don't really trust online stuff and banks and such. And he always totes money around with him. And so I know he has been impacted by the other story that you mentioned, but my concern is like going out of the parking deck of the hotel I stay at. You don't use cash to get out of that one. You have to use a credit card. Would they have to accept cash now? So it's just food for thought. I know we got a hearing, and I apologize for taking up time again. Mr.
No,
Chairman.
that's that is a very good question, Representative Perkle. I would your Georgia Tech background really comes in handy sometimes.
If I could respond to that, you make such a good point, though, because the apps up here, especially in the metro area, you do have to go online. You have to download an app to park, and everybody doesn't have access to a cell phone. So I think that also kind of goes into the point of we're forcing people to use a form of legal tender that everyone just doesn't have.
Okay, we've got another question. Representative Mitchell, who is online. You have a question?
Yes, thank you so much. I think this bill, given the examples we've heard, it can be really significant in Georgia. I also had some questions about unintended consequences. So right now, merchant is kind of defined as everyone who's selling something. So is it intended that this bill includes like Girl Scouts, lemonade stands, or vendors at a farmer's market?
It is, because in the bill, it says merchandise, wares, goods, services. So if you're trying to purchase anything, a consumer should have the option to use their dollar bill if they want to use their dollar bill versus being forced to go online to do something. Because think about in a rural community, people are struggling with, just access to the internet in some places. And likewise, in an urban community, everyone just doesn't have access to the internet to purchase things.
I'm just thinking in the context of, say, something like a children's charity sale, but even in the context of something like a fair or an event where you don't know what the attendance will be. So if you have a very large amount of attendance and you're selling cotton candy and you do actually run out of change, not because you weren't prepared for an expectation, but because there was an unusual change in attendance, at that point we are creating a situation where folks would have to shut down if they run out of change, or have an extensive burden on the seller at a potentially small dollar event to figure out and report a difference. So I don't know if it's worth thinking about the impact on very small businesses, and whether there needs to be some threshold for kind of temporary business sales. I don't know, was that just, is that something worth discussing?
We did put in the bill, we took into consideration large events. So the bill says events that are servicing people of 500 or more.
Okay.
It originally was 800 and we took it down to 500.
And I had one last question. If someone says, keep the change, is that now change needing to go to the state?
So so the first version said the money would go to the state, but we changed it with legislative counsel that says the change needs to go to the person. And after speaking to legislative counsel, we kind of came up with in an agreement that nobody would say, send my change to the state.
So in this case, if someone does tell you, keep the
Representative
change,
Mitchell. Okay.
sorry, do you have to refuse it?
You know, at that point, I would assume, not being an attorney, that the consumer is giving a donation to the store if they don't want their change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're gonna try to take one or two more questions, and I've got someone else wants to testify. Is that you, Chairman Watson?
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to say that, you know, I'm good with this bill. You know, you and I both, you know, we bring foreign workers to our farms to help us, and they don't have bank accounts, and they're here on a temporary basis, and they only have cash. And so that's the only way they know how to use is cash. So this is very beneficial for them. And then to Chairman Perkle's point, it sounds to me like if you're paying $20 to park, they can pay somebody to stand there and take your $20. So those things are difficult to use. So that's it.
Chairman Perkle.
Would it be possible to offer a friendly amendment to this bill? You know, only if if a cashier is present, so that you might handle some of the problems that we talked about, the unintended consequences for the whatever. But would that alleviate your concern, Sam? Chairman Watson?
I think it'd be a good amendment at proper time. You got wording, or maybe Council Berry could come up with something. We got one more question, Chairman Lewis Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to follow up on a previous question. You mentioned that this would apply to all merchants. Say, for example, an author is having a book sale. There may be less than 800 book buyers at that event. Are we creating a situation where that author would have to take cash for the purchase of a book?
So it's 500, and that is true. And maybe, again, I'm open to amendments to just make sure it works for everyone. So maybe an amendment could say something to the effect of, say if the author is doing multiple, like the Girl Scouts, or the author is doing multiple events that equal up to 500 people that they're taking online. But I mean, I would have to defer to legislative counsel on the exact wording to make that happen. You know, my main concern with the bill is just making sure that a consumer can purchase something and not be forced because everyone doesn't have access to the internet or a card.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Let's move on. Well, go ahead real quick.
Thank you. Just wanted to mention that I am an author, and we go out and do book sales, and sometimes it may not be safe for us to just accept cash at the particular event. So if we could do some kind of workaround for that small business, that author, or that Girl Scout person that's selling a cookie, we would appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Maynard. We're going to move on. We're going to take testimony here from my friend Karen Broomer with the Georgia Restaurant Association. Is she here? I thought I saw her. Yes. Karen, could you come? Would y'all? Huh? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. All right. Well, why don't we ask Representative Maynard to get with legal counsel and a couple others, Chairman Perkle and others, and maybe come up with some alternative wording to that bill and maybe bring it back for that time. Okay. Next on our agenda will be HB 1376, Representative Moore. Another dog bill.
I have some additional printouts. Do you mind if I? Good morning, Ag Committee. Appreciate the chance to be with y'all here today to introduce you to House Bill 1376. I tried my best to go around the chamber and talk to each of you individually, but if I did not get the chance to do that, it is only because apparently half of our dang chamber is on this committee. There's a lot of y'all. But what I can tell from the inquiries earlier this morning is that we got a lot of people on this committee who love dogs. And if you love dogs, I think you're going to love this bill. All right. So this bill solves a problem that exists in my district, which is that we have a restaurant that opened right before COVID, right? Perfect timing, right before the pandemic, called Lazy Dog, which is why you just received a copy of a portion of their menu. And I'll explain why you've received that. You see, Lazy Dog is one restaurant among many that could exist that may be in operation right now that fashions itself as a dog-friendly restaurant. Now, what that means is they have a special outdoor patio where dogs are allowed. Dogs are not allowed in indoor dining rooms in Georgia at all. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about a special place on an outdoor patio for dogs, and that is already legal. But this restaurant, Lazy Dog, which is a national franchise, they operate in 7 states, they go one step further and say, if you want to bring your dog to join you for a dining experience on the outdoor patio, that they have a special menu just for your dog, because it's dog safe food. Not all human food is safe for dogs. And so they care about dogs and they want to make sure that your dog is taken care of while they are on the restaurant property enjoying that dining experience. And this beautiful outdoor patio with fire pits is a very social type of environment. But there's a problem, is that the Georgia Department of Public Health has refused to offer them a variance to serve this menu that you see right here. It's real simple. It's dog safe food, but it's also human grade food. So the food product itself is perfectly fine for both human and dog consumption, but they refuse to change the rules and regs to accommodate this new business vertical that would not only help this restaurant, but any other restaurant that is looking for unique ways to draw people back out into the dining rooms as we recover from the pandemic. So what this bill proposes, and you can see it's only 2 pages, and I'm happy to walk you guys through the bill. It proposes 2 very simple things. Number 1, as you see under section A there, starting at line 11, it says that if a food establishment chooses to serve a dog menu, then so long as they follow the protocols promulgated by the Department of Public Health, that they will not be considered in violation of the rules and regs that govern public health. The second thing that it proposes, if you flip over to line 18, section B, is it also states that the Department of Public Health shall establish what those rules and regulations are. So this bill acknowledges that there is a role for the Department of Public Health here, but also says that they will not just categorically deny these businesses the right to serve the items that you see on this menu right here. And that is all this bill does. And I would appreciate the committee's favorable consideration so we can move this through. You can see that we have some very strong voices as co-sponsors of this bill, including Chairman Cooper, Casey Carpenter, who's the only restaurateur in our entire chamber.
Chairwoman Rich, of course, because we share a love of dogs. And my seatmate, Joseph Gullett, because he and I have a special relationship and have worked on animal-friendly legislation before. So I know we have a couple of folks that want to speak to the bill, but I'm happy to take any questions now.
Thank you, Representative Moore, for bringing this bill. Very interesting. We'll take a couple of questions. Chairman Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple questions. I worried a little bit about, I'm the insurance lady. Liability, is the restaurant assuming liability in this if the dog should bite somebody, or is the owner the only one? Is there going to be a second layer in there? I guess is where I'm going.
Yes, Lazy Dog spends a lot of money on a very solid insurance policy that would cover any kind of dog bite. We have a representative from the restaurant who can address those questions more succinctly, but I asked that same question to them when we were talking about bringing this bill. And,
Is it in the
and I'll
bill?
add that they said that they have in their many years of operation never had an issue.
Good. And if I could follow up,
Go
after
ahead.
after the dog has their meal, they sometimes have other business they take care of. Is there a separate place for that, or how do you handle that?
I will defer that question to the restaurant owner to describe the properties in which they operate. But I know, for example, they have plans to open 4 locations in Georgia, and their first location is in my district in the city of Peachtree Corners. And the location they chose includes a public green space where there's walking trails and a big lawn, where people routinely bring their dogs already. So I believe that is factored into their choice of location. They also recently did a ribbon cutting ceremony on their location in the city of Dunwoody. They have plans to open one in Vinings and another location in Representative Chuck Martin's district in Alpharetta, which is why you guys might have heard from him. He's a big supporter of this bill too.
Thank you. We're going to take some testimony. I see Galen Baxter from Department of Public Health. Is he here? Would he come to the podium? I'd love to get some testimony from you. Tell us a little bit titles and who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Andrews. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Policy at the Georgia Department of Public Health. Thank you for taking the time to hear this bill today. As Representative Moore mentioned, there was a variance application for this restaurant in 2018, seeking to serve a dog menu on the patio of their restaurant. Due to public health concerns, that variance request was denied. I have Galen Baxter with me to walk through a little bit of those public health concerns. And also, just so you are aware, the Department of Agriculture may have some interest in this legislation as far as animal feed and whether this would fall under animal feed regulations. I know Bo Warren with Department of Ag is here to answer specific questions about that, but I just wanted to draw your attention to those potential implications. And Galen will talk to you about the public health concerns.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify. I currently serve in the role of the Director of the Environmental Health Department for Fulton County. And prior to that, I was the Food Service Program Director for the state of Georgia with the Department of Public Health. We do have some concerns about this particular bill. And, as was mentioned, the variance, the Lazy Dog Cafe did apply for a variance to the rules and regulations in the food service establishment rules. And the reason it was denied was because back in 2015, the rules and regulations for food service establishments was updated to include a section to allow dogs to dine on the or to sit on the patio with dog owners. We saw that trend moving across the nation. And so we were trying to, offer that opportunity for the restaurateurs here in Georgia. And the reason that we decided to not include the section for people to be able to feed their dogs on the patio is for a couple of different reasons. One is the Department of Public Health is also responsible for rabies control in the state of Georgia. And so while rabies has been pretty much eradicated in canines, there is the responsibility for environmental health to also go out and investigate any dog bites that occur. And a lot of times that's in conjunction with local animal control. But, as you know, a lot of the rural counties may not have animal control. So it falls to the local environmental health specialist to take care of that, to make sure that they're being quarantined properly. And sometimes, heaven forbid, that the heads have to be sent off for testing. So that's an additional burden that would be placed on local environmental health specialists that also regulate restaurants. So it didn't make sense to allow or create a rule that's going to create, a situation where we're providing an opportunity for dog bites to occur. The second reason is because if you, we have some literature that we can share with you on, and it speaks to what was mentioned just a few moments ago. After dogs eat, a lot of times they do have to defecate or vomit. And so we didn't want to create a situation where this could, create a potential issue for wait staff or customers to have to clean up this while they're trying to eat, or for other customers to have to witness this occurring while they're trying to eat, and the potential to draw flies to the area while people are, sitting there trying to dine. The other thing too goes back to the dog bite. We know that dogs do get aggressive sometimes around eating, and they can be as sweet as they can be. I can speak personally. I've got 3 dogs that live together, work together, play together. And just last week, they went crazy fighting over some food that fell on the floor. And so we're concerned that a child could walk by and a dog could get aggressive and snap, or other dogs trying to eat together could get aggressive, and which leads back to the dog bite issue that we were trying to prevent to start with. So.
Okay, thank you. Committee, we're out of time. I'm going to call Chairman Carpenter to the podium mic if you want to say a few words very shortly, and then we're going to have to adjourn. My apologies, we didn't get a longer time, but we'll have to try to reschedule. I know Representative Jenkins got a bill. Chairman Carpenter.
Thank you very much, committee. I appreciate you. Obviously, I'm here in support of this bill. I think at the end of the day, this just provides another revenue center for restaurants that have been struggling through the pandemic. And I think a lot of what we're hearing right now is a bunch of what ifs, and what if this happens, and what if this happens. And I think a lot of these companies, and I'm not familiar with the company at all, but I think if they have a business model that works in other states, they've already addressed these issues. If there's an issue of going to the bathroom, they're going to be out in front of that, because that's what's best for their business, right? If you walk into a restaurant and there's dog poop everywhere, you're not going to go back. So they're going to solve these issues in the private sector. And so I particularly don't prefer dogs at restaurants. Matter of fact, it gets on my nerves, to be honest with you. But there's a certain group of people that like to bring their dogs to restaurants and sit on the patio. And at my pizza restaurant, I'm sure they're handing their dogs some pizza crusts. So it's already occurring in the real world. What I'm saying is allow these people to be able to sell this food, because the dogs are there anyway. Their business model set up that way. And it's just another revenue center. So I appreciate your time. And
thank you. We're on a hard, sorry, Representative Moore, we will bring this back at our next meeting. Sounds like a good bill to me. Meeting adjourned. Thank y'all.